Right now, Hagrid, the balance lead for Age of Mythology Retold, is heads down working on the game. If you've spent any time in the community recently, you'll know that means they are getting absolutely flooded with balance suggestions. Some of those suggestions are valid, some of them aren't, and some of them are pointing at real problems that simply aren't fixable through balance changes alone. The thing is, most balance feedback, including my own at times, comes from a feelings basis. And feelings are actually a useful starting point. If something feels broken, if a unit feels too tanky, if a god power feels impossible to play around, that feeling is worth paying attention to. It's pointing at something, but feelings alone cannot be what drives balance decisions. Because feelings don't account for role, they don't account for cost, and they almost never compare the right things to each other. What I want to do in this video is give you a framework for thinking about balance more rigorously. Not to tell you your feedback is wrong, but to help you ask better questions. Because when you compare a unit to the right units, when you account for what it actually costs and what it's actually designed to do, the picture looks very different to what your gut is telling you mid-game after losing a fight. The core principle is simple. You have to compare apples to apples. A unit that counters infantry cannot be benchmarked against a unit that counters cavalry. Context is everything. So let's build the framework and let's see what the numbers actually say. Before we get into any numbers, we need to establish the foundation, because none of the analysis means anything if you don't understand what each unit is actually designed to do. Age of Mythology has a counter system. Think of it like rock, paper, scissors, except there are more moving parts. If you've ever seen The Big Bang Theory, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, it's closer to that. More relationships, more complexity, but the underlying logic is the same. Every unit has something it's designed to beat and something it's designed to lose to. The call loop works like this. Infantry beats cavalry. Cavalry beats archers. Archers beats infantry. That's your fundamental triangle, and everything in the game is built around it. Then layered on top of this is the myth unit relationship. Myth units beat human units, infantry, archers, cavalry, all of them. Heroes beat myth units, and human units beat heroes. That's a second triangle sitting on top of the first one. Now there is a third category of units that sits entirely outside these triangles. Counter units. And they operate by different rules. Counter infantry beats infantry, but loses to archers and cavalry. Counter archers beat archers, but lose to infantry and cavalry. Counter cavalry units beat cavalry, but lose to infantry and archers. Counter units are human units, which means they lose to myth units just like any other human unit, but they do not counter heroes because their base DPS isn't that high. Counter units are specialists. They exist to do one specific job exceptionally well, and they pay for that specialization everywhere else. If any unit is an exception to this, if a unit is winning matchups it has no business winning, or losing matchups it should comfortably beat, that is a signal. Either it needs to be brought up to do its job properly, or it needs to be brought back in line. The counter system is the skeleton of this game. When a unit breaks it, the whole thing starts to feel wrong. Alright, so let's build the tools we need to actually evaluate units properly. The first thing we need to understand is damage types, because not all damage is created equal, and not all health is created equal either. There are 4 damage types in Age of Mythology: Hack, Pierce, Divine, and Crush, and each one interacts with a unit's health pool differently. Hack damage is reduced by hack armor, so when we want to know how long a unit actually survives against hack damage, we don't look at raw HP. We look at effective hack hit points, or EHHP. The formula is simple. HP divided by 1 minus hack armor divided by 100. A unit with 115 HP and 40 hack armor isn't surviving 115 points of hack damage. It's surviving the equivalent of just over 191. And this is important. Raw HP alone tells you almost nothing, but the armor stat alone tells you nothing either. You need both numbers together to understand how durable a unit actually is. Pierce damage works the same way, just against pierce armor. Effective pierce hit points, or EPHP. A unit might have very different EHHP and EPHP depending on how its armor is distributed. And that distribution tells you a lot about what it's designed to fight. Divine damage is the exception. It ignores armor entirely. Against divine damage, raw HP is all that matters. No multipliers, no reduction. What you see is what you get. And then there's crush damage. Almost every human unit in the game has 99% crush armor, which means crush damage deals almost nothing to them. Crush damage exists primarily for sieging buildings and for myth units, so when you're evaluating human units, you can largely set crush aside. It's not part of the conversation. Now let's talk about DPS, damage per second, and this is where I want to be precise about something, because it's easy to get this wrong. Base DPS, without any bonus multiplier applied, is not meaningless. It actually tells you something very important. It tells you how good a unit is as a generalist. An infantry unit is built to kill cavalry, yes, but a good generalist infantry unit can also trade cost effectively against other infantry, and sometimes can even beat archers. Base DPS is what you use to evaluate that. Where base DPS becomes insufficient is when you're asking how well a unit does its specific job. If you want to know how effective a spearman is against cavalry, you have to apply that 1.75 times bonus. Effective DPS against the intended target is what tells you whether the unit is doing what it is designed to do for what it costs. Both numbers matter, they're just answering different questions. Now cost. And this is where it gets really interesting because cost in this game has two dimensions: resources and population. Resource efficiency tells you how much stat you get per resource spent. DPS per resource, EHHP per resource. This tells you how the unit performs when resources are the limiting factor, which is most relevant early in the game when you're building your army and population cap isn't yet the constraint. Population efficiency is a different question entirely. It tells you how much stat you get per population slot used. And this matters enormously at the late game when you're at or near your population cap. A unit that looks expensive per resource but gets exceptional stats per population slot becomes incredibly powerful at full population. Conversely, a unit that looks cheap per resource but gets poor stats per population stat is best used as an early flood. Get them out fast, fight before your opponent is maxed, because they don't scale as well into the late game. These two numbers, resource efficiency and population efficiency, tell you when a unit is strongest and how it should be used. And that context is essential before you make any judgment about whether a unit is balanced. So let's get into the actual units. We're starting with infantry, and I've put together a spreadsheet that breaks down every infantry unit across the civilizations we're looking at. What you're seeing on screen is hit points, damage per second, hack armor, pierce armor, effective hack hit points, effective pierce hit points, speed, cost, and population. And then the efficiency columns: DPS per resource, EHHP per resource, DPS per pop, EHHP per pop. Before we get into the rankings, I want to address two units that require a different kind of comparison. The Myrmidon from Greece and the Fanatic from Atlantis. Both of these units have their effective DPS baked directly into the DPS column rather than applied as a bonus multiplier. And the reason for that requires a brief explanation. The Myrmidon deals divine damage. Divine damage ignores armor entirely. It doesn't matter whether the target has 10% hack armor or 60% hack armor. The Myrmidon deals its full DPS regardless. That makes it impossible to compare on a flat basis with hack damage units, because the value of divine damage changes completely depending on what it's hitting. Against a unit with 50% hack armor, the Myrmidon's 7.9 base DPS is equivalent to a hack damage unit doing 15.8 DPS. That's a 2x multiplier, and that's the approximation used in the spreadsheet. Now, here's something important. Units in this game gain armor as the game progresses through player investment in upgrades. It is not uncommon for a fully upgraded unit in the late game to have more than 50% hack armor, which means the 2x approximation is not just reasonable. In a fully upgraded late game scenario, it is actually conservative. The Myrmidon gets significantly better as the game goes on and players invest in armor upgrades. Against a unit with 40% hack armor, common for units in the heroic age, the equivalent DPS is 13.17. Against a unit with only 25% armor, it drops to 10.53. And against an unarmored target, the Myrmidon is just doing its raw 7.9 DPS, the weakest output in the infantry group in its entirety. So the Myrmidon is a unit whose value scales with the game clock. Early, when armor upgrades haven't landed, it is ordinary. Late, when everyone is fully upgraded, it is extraordinary. The Fanatic from Atlantis has a similar situation. Its effective DPS of 15.75 is already the combined value accounting for its bonus against both infantry and cavalry. The Fanatic deals strong damage against both of those unit types, but against archers, heroes, and myth units, it is working from base DPS only. Alrighty, with those caveats out of the way, let's get into the rankings. Here we go. We got the Myrmidon as our S tier. It comes in with a whopping score of 18. We're playing golf here. The lower the score, the better. Then we've got the Fanatic. As we're going through this, I recommend getting the spreadsheet up, checking out the numbers. So the Fanatic's at 33. Then actually comes in Chinese's Dao Swordsman. And then the Hoplite as well. These guys are kind of close to each other at the score of 40 and 42. Where's my Hoplite at? Bam. We're going to get through this quick because we've got a lot of units to go for. Now, the Murmillo comes in next. And this one's surprising to me because the Murmillo is such a good unit, but when it comes down to the actual stats that you're getting for a generalist unit, amazing. But if you're going to be counting in all the counter add-on stats and things like that, like we are, then of course these Hoplites, the Hoplite's going to do a little bit better. The Dao Swordsman got so much survivability. It is slow, but I mean, how do you rank that? You can only give a point for that type of thing. And if we continue along, we have the Ocelotl Warrior here. I'm going to put this guy in B tier as well. Bit of a hard unit to actually judge because it does have some of its power budget baked into the fact that it has a jump. So while it's down here in the B tier, it does have a jump, which probably could boost it up higher. You have to give a little bit of a thought to that. Moving on, we have the Berserk. This unit is in the C tier. He's actually got a score of 53. Spearman comes in next at a score of 56. And the Samurai is all the way down here in the D tier. Some of these did really, really surprise me. In particular, the Samurai. This unit is not very good at all. And I think this is why it came out with such a high counter bonus versus infantry when it actually did come through. But the fact of the matter is it's got so many unique upgrades, and some of this is true for some of these other units on the list, but they've got so many unique upgrades that if you can stack those upgrades up, that can actually bring their value all the way up. But one thing's for certain, this Myrmidon I think is super undervalued. Its stats are amazing. It's really, really cheap as well for for the stats you get. I think it's just a really, really good unit. Let's move over to the archers now. So I'm gonna do the archers in two different ways. So the first way I'm going to do is we're just going to show you what they are based on their stats. And then the second way I'm going to do is we're going to talk about it when I get there. But it does have quite a... it's important to talk about. So let's go with our first unit. This one shouldn't really come as a surprise. The Amazon Archer is the new unit for Demeter. You have a build limit of it. You can only get 10 of them, but they are well and truly the best archer in the game, having a score of 34. They've got the most range. They've got the best, I think they've got the best DPS per pop. They've got the best DPS times their counter. I don't think they have a counter. No, they don't. They don't have the best of that, but it's pretty strong. They've got the most EHP per cost, the most EHHP per cost. They've got the best DPS. No, they don't have the best DPS per cost. They're actually not that cost efficient in hindsight, but they are doing the most damage per pop, which I think is probably the most important metric for the late game, especially because you can get these units out for free when you're going for Hera, which a lot of players, commenters have been saying is not very good, but actually it ends up being very, very good for Hera, for Demeter's Hera. Nonetheless, the next unit on this list is, maybe you could say it's not an archer, but I say it's an archer. It is the Throw and Axeman. This guy is at a score of 49. There are some very, very considerable weaknesses here, which this list is not going to actually take into account because we aren't basing off the unit actually macroing. So this guy here, he's got some incredible amount of DPS. If you leave him there, he's going to really deal with the infantry well, and all the other good stuff. Then we have the Toxote here as well. This is around about the same score, 49, 52. And the Tequiwa Archer is going to come in here as well. Where are you, my boy? Tequiwa Archer. So these guys are sitting in... Actually, it's not just the Tequiwa Archer. It's also the Fire Archer. A lot of these units are quite similarly statted. Fire Archer, Yumi Horse Archer as well. This guy comes in on this tier. And you can also probably say that the Chuko Nu belongs in here as well, as he comes up onto this one. So yeah, all of these are sitting in around that score of 50-ish. They're all very, very, very solid units to just sort of leave there and do damage. But yeah, the next one in the list is where things get a bit funky. We have the Yumi Archer. This one comes in on B tier in the 60s. We drop down now to the C tier for the Carabalista. And then the Arcus as well are in the 70s. Where's my Arcus at? Arcus comes into here in the 70s. Then we jump down... excuse me, that's incorrect. The Arcus goes into the D tier. The Chariot Archer is in the C tier. And then at the very, very depths of this list is the Gastrophotores. So yeah, these units here is just based on their actual damage and survivability stats. The issue with ranking the archers like this is that it doesn't take into account the fact that there's range and there's speed associated with these units. And the main point with the range and the speed is, if I have more range than you and I have more speed than you, then I dominate you. The survivability metrics don't matter anymore because you're not going to do any damage to me. I'm just going to stay outside of range and I'm going to kill you. And we have seen this in practice as well quite a bit with, say, the Chariot Archer absolutely dominating the Slinger, a unit that it's supposed to counter the Chariot Archer, but doesn't matter because it can't get into range to do any damage because the Chariot Archer will be able to keep on shooting pot shots while staying out of range with when it used to have a massive 24 range with the Bone Bow. So keeping that in mind, what we're going to do now is I'm going to redo this list when units have got micro. And basically what this means is, how many different archers can the unit dominate? How many other units can it, do survivability metrics and damage not really matter because you're just not going to be able to get in there? So there's no surprises here for what the S tier unit is. I already mentioned it. It is the Chariot Archer. It actually dominates everything. The only unit I think that can probably get a similar amount of value or doesn't really care about the Chariot is going to be the Amazon Archer. Then again, you can only make 10 of them, but still you can't shoot and scoot versus the Amazon Archer. She's got more range than the Chariot Archer does, so the speed doesn't matter. Then we'll go into our A tier, which is going to be our Eagle Warrior, our Yumi Archer, our Arcus. So our Yumi Archer, our Arcus, our what did I just say? Yumi Archer, Arcus, and Eagle Warrior. I didn't rank that before. Whoops. The Eagle Warrior was ranked in... It was ranked in the same sort of region as the Yumi Horse Archer. So yeah, these guys are going to pop into here. Now, the Yumi Horse Archer is an interesting one. I think that because it's got such high DPS and its speed is high, even though its range is quite low, it's going to be able to get into range of the Arcus and of the Yumi Archer more often than not without actually dying. So it's going to be able to get off its DPS. And then once the Yumi Horse Archer is in range, it only has to catch up about like 5-ish range, 4 or 5-ish range to get in there. It's going to be able to actually compete with these two units. So yeah, while the Eagle Warrior doesn't care, in fact, it's winning basically all of these archers because of its range. While it doesn't care, I think this guy deserves to be here, even though maybe he's a little bit below. But because of that speed, he can get in and he can deal with these guys somewhat decently. Of course, this also should be mentioned that this also matters in terms of against infantry as well, where the Arcus and the Yumi Archer will be able to get off a lot of shots before they actually start taking damage versus an infantry unit, and the Horse Archer is never going to take any damage versus an infantry unit because it does have that 5 speed. The only infantry units I think that can catch it are the Coyote Warrior and maybe the Huskar when it's got boosted speed from 4 City, right? Anyways, if we continue along, I'm just going to start throwing these guys in here. Chukonu is a absolutely garbage unit when it comes to micro. It doesn't dominate anyone. It's got tiny range. It's got tiny speed. It's got gigantic DPS, which basically means it doesn't do anything if it's in trouble. If someone is microing, it's not going to do anything. I could probably even put it down in the D tier. It's not worth building when someone can micro, right? But if you don't micro, it's insane. So there you go. Now we've also got the Fire Archer. These units start becoming very, very bad as well in this sort of a list because, well, they don't have any range. So the Toxote, the Fire Archer, the Throwing Axeman as well, I believe is in here just because of how low their range is. They're probably actually similar to the Chukonu, so we'll chuck them into C tier. This Tekiwa Archer is actually in the B tier because of its speed mostly. It does have tiny range, but again, the speed allows it to get in range of, say, the Arcus here. So the fact that this guy's got 4.5 speed means he can get in range of the Arcus. Also, it allows him to kite a lot of different infantry units, so that can be very, very helpful there as well. The Coraballista is in the B tier because of range only. It's actually got no speed, so the range allows it to be in here, but because its speed is so low, it gets caught up to by a lot of different infantry units. That being said, this unit does mostly function as good as it can when you've got like units surrounding it and allowing it to actually be in basically melee range to get all of its DPS off. It's a bit of a strange unit, but nonetheless. And we have the Gasha for Taurus, which you could say is a B tier unit, similar to how the Coraballista is. It's got gigantic range, but this isn't even supposed to be in this list. It's a building killer. It's not supposed to kill units, so we just ignore that one. And then we move on to the Cavalry, which are there any units here that sort of surprised you on this list? I'm not really surprised on it. I think it makes sense. There's a couple of units that just never see any play at high levels, but at lower levels would be really, really good. Like the Toxote, for example, amazing low-level archer unit, but absolutely terrible in the hands of players who have got the micro down. So yeah. All right, our next one is the this next list might be a little controversial, but remember, I'm just doing this based off the stats. But yeah, the next list might be a little bit controversial. Our best statted cavalry unit in the game is the Raiding Cavalry. I think this unit is trash. I would have, if I didn't look at the stats, I would have said this unit goes into D tier and you just try not to build it. You only build it when you absolutely have to. But the stats actually say it's good, and that's probably just me being biased, and I said this earlier on. Maybe this unit doesn't suck. Maybe it's actually quite good and I just don't understand it. In fact, the part of this unit that is absolutely amazing is the DPS versus the counter per pop. So it's got 4 DPS per pop. That's a lot versus it's not even 4 DPS per pop. That's its generalist damage. It's got the most generalist damage. Against its counter, it's got 7 DPS per pop, which is the most by quite a large margin. I think the next closest is the White Horse Cavalry at 6.3. So it is very, very strong, and it's also got the cheapest DPS per cost, which just means it's super cheap. It's really good for its population. It's really good for its cost. Everything points to this unit being absolutely amazing. The only thing that's letting itself down is its effective hack HP. But even so, it's not really letting itself down by that much. So anyways, next unit in this list is going to be the Elephant. Now, you got to take this one with a little bit of a grain of salt. Its speed is so bad that you have to use it a little bit different. I'm going to actually pop him in the S tier, even though its speed is quite low, because all of the other stats make up for it. This unit is an amazing unit. It's amazing at taking out archers. The only archers that can beat this unit are archers that can kite forever. And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to try and kite an elephant forever, you're just going to lose all your buildings. Sorry, you got to build something that's not an archer versus this unit. It goes in the S tier. The next unit here as well, I'm also going to be looking to drop it in the S tier, which I think is partially the reason why we see the sort of like the cavalry is not very good. It's because the Jarl is so good as well. It's sitting at a 44. It does have less speed than the raiding cavalry. If you add all of that in, the raiding cavalry probably is in S tier by itself. But the Jarl has got such good survivability stats, such good generalist DPS, and everything else that it just ends up being the unit that the Norse player will basically want to go towards. And if they have to deal with mass archers, they might try and do something different. They might not go for the Jarl, they might go for a Huskarl or something like that. Nonetheless, the next unit here, one of Kavoth's favorite units, is the White Horse Cavalry. This unit, obviously very, very strong, comes out of the castle. It's got a 50. It's tied with the Naginata Rider as well, for different sort of reasons. I think the Naginata Rider has just less survivability and less damage overall, but maybe costs a little bit less. So yeah, you're paying a little bit less for the Naginata Rider, but does a little bit less, so it's basically the same. Then we have the Hippias coming in next. I'm going to pop this one into B tier because there's not a huge spread for this list. Then we got the Contarius coming in this B tier. Actually, you know what? No, we're going to put him in A tier. Contarius into B tier was a bit of a shocker for me. This unit, by all intents and purposes, seems like an absolutely busted unit, right? But the actual stats say no, it's mid at best. It's just mid at best. It's costing 3 pop, which is very similar for all of the different cav. Its cost per pop is 35, to which cheap. Its effective HP per pop is 54. Its effective Pierce HP per pop is 84, and that's middle of the road. Its DPS, when added with its counter, is at 13.5. Again, middle of the road. Its base DPS per pop is 3, which is middle of the road. Its DPS per pop, DPS times its counter bonus per pop, so versus archers, is 4.5. Again, middle of the road. Its DPS per cost is quite good. Its EHHP per cost is quite good. Its effective Pierce HP per cost is a little bit less. But so it's basically, this unit is basically just a kind of like doesn't cost very much type unit. So it's easy to overwhelm, but its actual stats aren't like they're middle of the road. So it's one of those like overwhelming units. It's there to overwhelm you early on because they're going to have more of that unit out of that. That's why it's good. So that's how you can use this list to sort of understand, or lose this spreadsheet to actually understand how to take max value out of a unit. All right, next one here is the Tiger Cavalry, which this is again a surprise to me because I would have said this unit is a S triple plus unit from my own sort of thought process on how things are, but this list doesn't take into account the fact that that Tiger Cavalry gets a bonus versus both Cav and Archers. So that's a little bit more difficult to actually compare. It's like the whole thing at the start, comparing apples to oranges. This unit, technically speaking, isn't really even a cavalry. It's a counter archer, counter cavalry unit. So it's cheating. And the same is true for the Camel Rider. As this guy is going to come below this. I'm going to actually pop these guys down in... Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to put them here. I'm going to put these guys down here. So the Tiger Cav and the Camel Rider, they're in their own little... They're in their own little tier of shenanigans. I don't really know how to compare them to these guys. They're very, very, very good units. Incredibly expensive, the Tiger Cavalry. This unit's got an insane amount of EHP per, or effective HP per pop, and also has good DPS, like really good DPS per pop as well, right? It's like top 4, and that's not taking into account that it also doesn't have to care about counter Cav, so it kills Cav as well, right? Then the Camel Rider, on the other hand, this unit's actually quite bad, and I'm not exactly surprised. I don't like building this unit unless I'm playing with Ra. Or I'm playing with Sobek, or I'm playing with Osiris. It's quite mid with Set, for example, because you just don't get any upgrades. I want to stay away from it. So I'm not exactly surprised to see this down here, especially because it's not got the it's not really taking advantage of itself. It's got a kind of crummy counter archer stat 1.25. It's not a counter archer. It's more of a counter cav, even though it doesn't counter cav. Like, you think about the actual damage that it does. Let me have a look at this. It's times 2, right? So Camel Rider times 2, DPS times counter goes up to 20. So it does have the most DPS of any cavalry unit versus cavalry, but it's not by much. And actually, the War Elephant has more DPS than it per counter. Actually, if you go into pop, the War Elephant has more. But oh no, it doesn't. I can't even figure this out. You'd have to divide it by 3, but they're all dividing by 3, so that's fine. Maybe I've just lost my train of thought. DPS times count. Anyways, I'm just gonna put him here. We're gonna move on. We got a lot of units to get through. Now I'm also gonna throw into this list, because they also counter archers. I'm gonna throw in the counter archer infantry units, Huskal, Shinobi, and Coyote Warrior. These guys all are scoring relatively similar. They're all pretty fairly statted between themselves. We've got the Huskal in the 50s, so we could put him up in the A tier. He's a little bit higher on the stats than, say, the Contarius. And then with the Contarius comes the Coyote Warrior and the Shinobi. So we'll put those both in with the Contarius here. Now, the way that I did the Shinobi is that he's got a special ability called Shinjutsu, which boosts its DPS and its speed. So I basically just averaged the DPS out over the period that if it was just attacking. So smack, 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 smack. If it's attacking, it has the Shinjutsu for whatever it is, 7 seconds. I can't remember. And then it doesn't have the Shinjutsu for the next. So its actual DPS is absolutely insane. The Shinobi goes up to 34.15. Of course, it's a 4-pop unit, so its DPS per pop is only going to be 8.5, but that is the best damage versus archers in the game. The only issue with this unit is that it has absolutely terrible survivability. So when you think about it, you go, okay, it's got terrible survivability. What's the way to use this unit? Well, the way to use this unit is to be very scrappy with it. Don't take a head-on fight with this unit. That's what the guy is for. So never, ever, 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 ever build this unit and then take on an opponent's army in its entirety. You want to go off, you want to go use its building killing capabilities. Actually, the only other way to think about using this unit is to use the smoke bomb. If you use the smoke bomb, you get on top of the enemy archers, then you use Shinjutsu and you kill them. That makes sense. But yeah, that's about it. The Coyote Warrior as well. Lots of people are saying this unit's really bad. I don't think it's awful. I think it needs a tiny touch up for it to come sort of closer to in line with the Huskal, who is an insanely good unit, but nonetheless needs a bit of a touch up in a little bit of different areas, mostly in terms of the effective pierce HP. It's a little bit on the low side for its cost. You're paying, actually, you're getting quite a bit of effective pierce HP per cost. I actually don't even know if it's, maybe it's just like because of the way the Aztecs are designed, there's not really a use for it, but its main use case for the Aztecs is to kill off counter archers. You've got Eagle Warriors to kill off the archers. You could see in the previous list, the Eagle Warrior just covers that role. So why would you build the Coyote Warrior? But it could probably use a little bit more pierce armor, but it is very, very cost efficient. Very cost efficient at the moment. It's got, it's, actually, maybe it's not cost efficient. Wait. I don't have that stat here. Why don't I have that stat here? Oh, well. I'm pretty sure the Coyote Warrior is very, very, you get a lot of stats for its cost. 5 times, anyways. You get a lot of stats for its EHHP and EPHP per cost. That's my take on the whole thing. But anyways, let's move on. Let's go to the Counter-Infantry here. This is where we're getting to the meat and potatoes. We're almost done for the actual human units, which brings me to, I guess, the next point while you guys are listening. Do you guys want to see me try and do this same type of thing with myth units? It's very, very different. Myth units are a very different kettle of fish, but I'd love to give it a go if you guys are interested and you like this sort of concept. But nonetheless, we come into the Counter-Infantry units, and it should come to no one's surprise here that this unit is absolutely busted. Very, very strong in every single way. It's the Sean one. This unit has got a AoE special, which does more damage, and it does stun. But even if it didn't have that, it would still be ranking #1 here on this list, which is wild, right? So yeah, this unit is off the charts in every single stat. I'm not sure there's a stat that it isn't the best in. DPS times counter, it's tied with the Cara Ballista, which is insane. DPS per pop, the Samurai does a tiny bit more DPS per pop versus infantry than the Sean one, but that doesn't take into account that the Sean one has got that AoE special. It has less DPS times counter per pop. So versus like the Paspis does a little bit more damage per pop than the Sean one versus infantry, but the Sean one has the AoE special. So then you have the cost on the unit, very cheap for all the stats. It's got good survivability. It's just a really good unit. A Pacifist, I already mentioned it. Let's bring that one in as well into the next stage. These next two units are quite similar to each other. Why can't I find anything? Is it down the bottom here? There it is. This guy can go in A tier, and the Axeman as well can come into A tier. Now, these guys are in the A tier for very, very different reasons. The Pacifist is in here basically because of efficiency in terms of pop, and the Axeman is in here basically because of efficiency for cost. So yeah, if the Axeman is a cost machine, it's going to do great damage for its resources, so you're going to be able to overwhelm an opponent, but the Pacifist is going to be able to be that death ball once you get to full pop. Then we have the Samurai. I'm not exactly surprised to see him here. He's actually just as good as these other two units. He's a very, very solid counter-infantry unit, which is why he sucked so hard in the infantry tier list. He's not an infantry unit. He's a counter-infantry unit. Wild. Anyways, then we have the Cara Ballista. This unit is very tough. These last two units are very tough to actually judge. In fact, I'm going to put them down into C tier. These units are very, very hard to judge inside of this tier list because they are ranged. And you can't really compare, again, apples to oranges. So even though they've got terrible statistics, it's all made up for with the range. So if I was to actually say where these units would sit, I would be putting the Throwing Axeman up in the S tier because of the range. I would be putting the Kari Ballista in the A tier because of the range. But that's where they're sitting in terms of the score with 0 micro. And yeah, so that's that. All right, now we go into the Counter Archer here as well. Let's chuck all these guys down. We're almost there. So the Counter Archer does have 2 separate sort of columns as well. We're just gonna chuck these guys in. How did this happen? Well, these guys we've already, actually, you know what? These guys have already been done. Let's not do the Counter Archer units again. We'll just jump straight into, or Counter Archer infantry units. Let's just jump straight into the Counter Archer units that are actually ranged. Funnily enough, and this one will surprise a lot of people, but this unit is the best one. Terma. There you go. I was surprised on this. I was like, yeah, the term is great, but it's going to die really quickly because it's all of its stats are baked into its speed. So yeah, it's going to die quick. Actually, no, it's really good. Its weakness is that it's double tagged. So that's a hefty weakness, and that is baked into its power budget as well. And that's not taken into account with my list. Anyways, next one is the Wuzu Javelinier. Where are you, my Wuzu? Should be down here. There you are. I'm going to put the Wuzu Javelinier into the A tier. Then we got the Eagle Warrior. Where are you? Eagle. Now, it could be argued here that if I did the comparison a little bit differently and I maybe gave some more weighting onto range and speed, that things would come out a bit different. But I thought that would be a little bit funky to do, especially because, you know, and we'll go with Slinger and Peltast at the bottom. If you do that, then you have to say, well, like 95% of the players' experience is this tier list that I'm showing. Whereas the other 5% who are quite good at the game, their experience is going to be based on micro and utilizing the unit with that range. So there is that. But the fact of the matter is that every single one of these units becomes S tier when microed. So there's not a bad, in terms of like the speed factor, the range factor, and their ability to deal with enemy, the ability to deal with enemy units, or enemy range units, I should say. There's not a bad unit in this list. These are all just really good, and that's my honest opinion. Of course, it's probably not in this range. Like the Peltast is probably the strongest. The Eagle Warrior here, and then the Slinger probably, or the Wuzu Javelinier is probably in here, and then the Terma, and then the Slinger in terms of just like the late game sort of population sort of deal. But when it comes down to it, we're trying to build these units to kill off archers. They're all killing off archers really well if you micro. Our final list here is going to be the Counter-Cavalry units. So this one is a bit difficult because, again, there's speed involved, and effectively it's like, how do I explain it? So you've got, what is a Counter-Cavalry's job? Well, it's to kill cavalry. What's a cavalry's job? Well, cavalry's job is to raid and kill archers. One unit can't really stop the raiding 100%. There's like a binary between whether a unit can stop cavalry raiding or can't stop cavalry raiding. And that binary is speed. So whether it's got 6 speed or less, like if it's got more speed than the opponent's cavalry unit. So for example, a Prodromus is going to be able to hard stop a Hippias at 5.5 speed from raiding. But a Prodromus at 6 speed is not going to be able to stop a Camel Rider at 6.6 speed from raiding. So there's a little bit more nuance to this list, or should be a little bit more nuance to this list that's not in there, and I'm not going to go into it today. But if you guys want me to, then let me know, and I'll maybe add it in a column for the list, and you can check it out yourself another day. So the Tlalmani Spearman is by far the most effective Counter-Cavalry unit in an actual fight. It does the most DPS. It costs nothing. It's just really good. It's probably overtuned in terms of what it does, but also the Aztecs don't have a cavalry unit, so it does make it a little bit more challenging. Like I said, this unit doesn't stop raids. It can sit there and prevent an area from being raided because the opponent won't want to run in there and lose all their cav while they try to kill villagers, but it's not going to be able to hard stop those raids like, say, even a raiding cavalry can stop raids, right, versus those Hippias, for example, completely, just because it will be able to outclass them on resources cost or whatever. Anyways, onwards and upwards. Next unit here is the Yadi Spearman, and this unit is fairly similarly statted to the Tlalmani Spearman. It costs more from memory. Is that true? It does cost, it obviously costs more. It's costing an extra 10 resources for 2 pops, so all the stats are going to be a little bit more expensive. But it does end up having a little bit cheap. I think it's a little, it gets a lot more stats for cost though as well. So the EHP is a little bit better than the Tlalmani Spearman, for example. But the Spearman's doing more DPS for its cost, especially with the counter damage as well. The counter, yeah, the damage is like 3 more for the Tlalmani Spearman versus the Yadi Spearman. Next unit here is the Catapultis. This one is very, very strong as well, but it does drop down into the A tier. If we pop this guy up here, he's at 38. Prodromus is at 41. I'm going to put him in the B tier now. Again, this is probably the best counter cavalry unit in the game, on the fact that it can shut down a lot of raids and the rest of these units can't. But in an actual fight, because its survivability is quite poor for its pop, it ends up not being very good there. So it's a weird one. It's like you build this unit to stop someone raiding you, and then you almost want to just go into hoplites, right? Which is fair enough. Like that's where it's going to be sitting. Next unit here, we're actually going to be throwing the Spearman back in here because it is technically a counter cavalry unit, even though it isn't really class like one anymore. It got changed because people were struggling with Egyptian at the lower levels. This unit sits in the similar sort of region to the Prodromus. Then we got the Camel Rider as well. I did say that this unit here had multiple different sort of roles. Camel Rider here. I didn't put the Tiger Cav into this list for some reason. I think he belongs in this list because he is technically a counter cav as well, just to see exactly where he would sit. But anyways, he's not in this list. If you want to see me put him in this list, let me know. We got the Herdman here as well. This guy is, I'm gonna put him down on the D tier with the Ger Halberdier. The fact of the matter is every single one of these units is quite good at doing its job, but some are better than others. Now the Herdman and the Halberdier do have some really, really good upgrades. The Spearman has some really good upgrades. The Camel Rider has some really good upgrades. They all have good upgrades. So if you really want to get you guys working, you can. The interesting thing as we do finish up this tier list, and let me know what you think in the comments below about the process. But the interesting thing about Age of Mythology is you got your base unit, yes. And everything might seem very, very fine here. And that's what you want, right? You want to start from that base where everything seems fine. And then you want to go, but hang on, all right, what happens when we start looking at the upgrades? And that might be for another video. So when we look at what all the units are fully upgraded, where do the stats change? Where does the story lead us there? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It did take me a very long time to organize this all. I was going to do it in a lot more detail with a lot more graphics, but to be honest, it was just taking too long. So I decided, you know what, we're just going to cut this down. We've got the Excel spreadsheet in the it's going to be in the Discord. It's in the description box below. Leave me a comment on what you guys reckon about myth units, heroes as well, if you want to see a similar thing done with those. And I'll see you guys in the next game.